Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you love creepy tales and bone-chilling mysteries, make sure to subscribe and join our haunted community. Hey everyone, I'm about to tell you something that happened to me a few years ago. It all started when a buddy of mine and I decided to go camping at this secluded lake way out in the woods. I never thought I'd be telling you this. I wish I could forget. It was late summer. We were both in our mid-20s and feeling like we needed to escape the noise of city life. A friend of mine, let's call him Jake, and I found this spot in the forest, deep enough that we wouldn't see anyone else. There was a small lake that we figured would be perfect for fishing, swimming, and just getting away from everything for a while. It was one of those lakes that's so quiet you can hear your thoughts, and the trees around it were thick enough to feel like you were miles away from civilization. We arrived around noon, set up camp, and everything was great for the first few hours. The sun was shining, the air was fresh, and the water was crystal clear. It looked like one of those places you'd see in a postcard. But then things started to change slowly, almost like the lake was watching us. As the sun started to dip behind the trees, we decided to take a swim. You know, just a casual thing, cool off after a long day of hiking. But here's where things got weird. We'd been in the water for a while, maybe 15 minutes, when Jake said he felt something brush against his leg. He thought it was just a fish, but there was something in his voice, something that made me pause. I shrugged it off, but then it happened to me too. A cold, almost deliberate sensation running past my ankle. We both looked at each other and didn't say anything. We just swam back to the shore. I figured it was just nerves, right? A few fish, maybe a plant brushing us underwater. But as we were getting out of the water, that's when things really started to feel off. We didn't hear any animals around. No birds, no rustling in the trees, nothing. It was dead silent, and that's when I noticed something strange. There was this faint ripple in the middle of the lake, like something was moving beneath the surface. It wasn't just the wind. I could see the waves weren't consistent with the current. They were circular, almost like something was stirring the water from below. Jake saw it too. We didn't talk about it much. We both grabbed our towels and got out of the water fast. I don't know why, but the feeling in my gut told me to get away from the lake. We went back to camp, lit the fire, and tried to act like nothing was weird. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the water was still watching us, waiting. That night, we went to bed early. We were both exhausted from the hike, but the silence kept us awake. The whole night, I kept hearing sounds, quiet, subtle noises, like something walking around the campsite, or maybe something moving in the trees. But every time I looked out, there was nothing there. It was about 3 in the morning when it all started. I woke up to the sound of something splashing in the lake. It wasn't like a fish jumping or a log floating. No, this was different. It was heavy, almost like something large was moving through the water. I woke Jake up and we both lay there in the dark, listening. The splashing continued for a few minutes, then stopped. But what got to me the most was that the ripples we saw earlier in the lake, they started to show up again. But this time they were closer, almost like something, or someone, was moving just beneath the surface, circling our campsite. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who freaks out, but I had this cold feeling in my chest. Something was wrong. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to look out of the tent, but I had to. So I slowly unzipped the opening, trying not to make a sound, and what I saw made my blood run cold. In the moonlight, the lake was eerily still, except for these shapes. 2 or 3 dark, shifting figures under the water, moving around. They were big, too. I thought I saw a shadow breach the surface, but when I blinked, it was gone. I swear I could hear breathing, like someone was watching us from the water. I grabbed Jake and whispered, "Do you see that?" He didn't answer. He was staring out at the lake, his eyes wide. I could tell he saw it too. We both sat there, frozen. The sounds in the water stopped for a minute, then started again, this time closer, so much closer. We could hear them moving, something big and heavy, but we couldn't see what it was, just these deep ripples that were slowly coming toward the shore. Then, without warning, there was this massive splash. Something had breached the water right in front of us, just a few feet from where we stood. But when we ran to the edge, there was nothing there, no sign of any creature. Just the calm, cold water staring back at us. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We just sat there, listening, watching. And when morning came, we packed up as quickly as possible and left. I still can't explain what happened that night. Maybe it was a creature we don't know about, or maybe it was something else entirely. But I know this: there's something in that lake, something not right. And if you ever decide to go camping there, just be careful. Some things are better left undisturbed. Hey everyone, I've been debating whether to share this story for a long time. It's one of those experiences that feels like it shouldn't have happened. So it started like any other camping trip. My friend Ethan and I decided to head out for a weekend to this secluded spot in the woods. It was far enough away from everything that we thought we'd be able to relax, fish, and just disconnect. No cell service, no distractions, just nature. We found this perfect little clearing near a stream, tucked between two steep hills, and it felt like we were completely alone in the world. We set up our tent, made a fire, and started talking about old times. The night was peaceful at first. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. As night set in, though, things started to feel off. I can't put my finger on it exactly. The air got colder even though it was summer, and the forest felt too quiet. No bugs, no animals calling out in the distance, just absolute silence. It was eerie, but we shrugged it off, thinking it was just the nature of being deep in the woods. Around 10 p.m., we were sitting by the fire, eating some snacks, when Ethan got up and walked toward the edge of the clearing. There was a small path leading deeper into the woods. I thought he was just going to stretch his legs, but when he didn't come back right away, I started to get a little concerned. It wasn't like him to wander off without saying anything. I stood up to look for him, but before I could take more than a few steps, I heard him shout, "Hey, come here! You got to see this!" Now I didn't hesitate. I just ran toward the sound of his voice, thinking maybe he found something cool, like a deer or a bear or something. But when I caught up to him, what I saw wasn't anything I could have ever expected. Ethan was standing at the edge of the woods, looking down at the ground. His face was pale, his eyes wide. At first, I didn't see what he was looking at, but then I looked closer. There, in the dirt, was a footprint, but not like any animal footprint I'd ever seen. This one was huge, like a person's foot, but with strange, elongated toes. The shape was wrong, almost unnatural. The print was deep, like something heavy had walked through the soft earth, but there was no sign of where it came from. I remember feeling this wave of dread wash over me. It was just too odd. We both stood there for a few moments, just staring at it. Ethan whispered, "What the hell made that?" I didn't have an answer. I could tell he was starting to freak out, and I could feel myself starting to panic too. The silence of the woods around us seemed so much heavier now. Something was out there and we weren't alone. We decided to head back to the camp, but as we walked, we kept hearing things. Twigs snapping, leaves crunching. We weren't alone. And what made it worse was that whatever it was following us. But we couldn't see anything. Every time we looked back, the woods were just dark and still. We got back to the camp as fast as we could, but that strange, uneasy feeling didn't go away. We stayed by the fire for a while, trying to convince ourselves that it was just an animal. Maybe a bear, maybe something else. But then we heard it again, a low sound, almost like breathing, but not from any animal I knew. It was too slow, too deliberate. It came from the woods, from the direction of the footprint we'd found. The next few hours felt like they stretched on forever. We stayed in the tent, trying to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that breathing. The air outside seemed to grow heavier, like something was out there watching us. I can't explain it, but I knew something wasn't right. Around 2 a.m., we heard something else, a whisper. It was faint, but it was there, like a voice calling out, but no words. I know Ethan heard it too, because I saw him freeze, his eyes wide, his hand covering his mouth. Neither of us said anything at first. We just stayed still, listening to the voice that seemed to come from all around us. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. The voice was getting closer. That's when we heard the footsteps, heavy, slow, almost deliberate. And they weren't coming from the path. They were coming from the woods around the camp, like something was circling us. I knew we had to get out of there. But before we could even grab our stuff, the tent flapped violently, like something had hit it from the outside. We both jumped, and then there was a crash. The sound of something large moving through the woods, branches snapping, coming toward us. Without thinking, we bolted. We didn't pack anything. We just ran, and when we got back to the car, I remember looking back at the camp. The clearing was empty, no sign of anything. We didn't go back. We never even considered staying. As soon as we hit the road, I felt like I could breathe again. I don't know what was out there that night. Whatever it wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't friendly. The woods were alive with something that shouldn't have been there, and I'll never forget it. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, just a simple camping trip to get away from the noise of the city, to breathe in the fresh air, and to disconnect from the usual routine. You know, the kind of trip where you take your friends or family to enjoy the outdoors, cook some marshmallows over a fire, tell stories, and sleep under the stars. No one really expects something strange to happen. Jake and I had gone to this remote area of the mountains for a few days. The plan was simple: set up camp near a creek, chill, and do some fishing. We had plenty of food and gear. This was something we had done before, so it didn't seem like there was anything to worry about. The first night was normal. We set up our tent, built a campfire, roasted some hot dogs, and talked about the usual stuff: life, girls, stupid things we used to do in high school. But later that night, something felt off. Not right, not exactly scary, just different. It was about 3 a.m. when it happened. We had just gotten into the tent, and I was lying there, half awake, trying to fall asleep. That's when I heard it. A faint noise, a shuffle. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or something rustling around the campsite, looking for food. But the sound was too deliberate, too human. The kind of sound you make when you're trying to move quietly, but not doing a very good job of it. I turned to Jake. He was still snoring, completely oblivious. I was awake now, my heart pounding, listening. It was close, too close. I unzipped the tent just a little, careful not to make any noise, and peered out into the darkness. The fire had died down, but there was enough light to see the trees around us, the shadows of branches swaying in the wind. I saw him, a man, standing there just beyond the edge of the campfire's glow, staring at our tent. Now, I'll tell you, I've always been a little paranoid, so I thought I might have imagined it. But this guy didn't just look like he was passing through the woods. He was watching us, staring directly at the tent like he knew we were inside, like he was waiting for us to do something, anything. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, he was gone. Just vanished. I don't know how long I sat there, trying to convince myself that I was just tired, that my brain was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching us. that someone was out there. Eventually, I convinced myself to go back to sleep. But the next morning, things started to get even stranger. We woke up late, and by the time we were eating breakfast by the campfire, we noticed something weird. The fire pit was disturbed, like someone had been poking around in it. And there were these strange footprints around the tent. Large, muddy prints, almost as if someone had been walking in circles around it. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't think it was a bear. Bears don't make that kind of track, and we didn't see any animal signs like claw marks or fur. Jake was convinced it was some prankster, but honestly, I wasn't so sure. This guy, whoever he was, hadn't just been watching. There was something about him, the way he moved. It wasn't right. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. It felt like he was waiting for us to notice him, waiting for us to do something. That night, I insisted we keep the fire going. I don't know why. I think I thought it would keep us safe, you know? Like maybe we were just overreacting and the fire would ward off any weirdos or animals. But I couldn't shake that feeling that something was wrong. We were sitting by the fire, eating some canned beans. Yeah, real gourmet, I know, and talking about going back home early when I heard it again. A rustling, but this time it was closer. I turned around and there, standing just behind a tree near the edge of the firelight, was the same guy. Just standing there, watching us. I don't know how long he had been there. A minute? 10 minutes? I didn't know. I only know that when I looked at him, he didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't try to hide. He just stood there, watching. Jake was oblivious again, too busy stuffing his face with beans, and when I told him to turn around, he laughed. "Dude, it's probably a hunter. Chill out." But I couldn't chill. I stood up, grabbing the nearest thing I could find, one of the half-burned logs from the fire, and walked toward him. The guy didn't move. He didn't even seem startled when I yelled at him. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, "What the hell are you doing?" Finally, after a few seconds of silence, he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low, almost whispering, like he was saying it for my benefit, like he was making sure I heard him. Now, I don't know if I was just terrified at that point, or if my mind was playing tricks on me, but there was something in his eyes, something cold. He wasn't just some hiker or someone lost in the woods. There was a malice there, a dangerous kind of malice. Before I could even respond, the guy turned and disappeared into the trees. Not running, not even walking quickly. He just melted into the darkness. We packed up and left the next morning, no questions asked. I don't care what Jake says, I'm never going back to that spot. There was something about that guy, something that made my skin crawl. The worst part, a few months later, I found out that people had gone missing in that exact area. They disappeared without a trace, and no one had ever found out what happened to them.